wonderful occasion. These days, collaborations with other curators and other museums are absolutely critical to moving forward. Julien Robson, who will be introduced in a moment by Noel Smith, approached me and us about sharing this exhibition with the Speed Museum, with the work he was doing there. He's now at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. So he's no longer with the Speed, but I think now has even a more grand contemporary space to program. So we look forward to more projects from you, Julien. Whenever an exhibition like this is put together, and tonight we're opening actually 2 shows. In our East Gallery is the Werner Reiterer Raw Loop, and in our West Gallery is the Faculty Focus exhibition. And next Tuesday, the faculty members that are in that exhibition will have a talk back or a talking session moderated, a discussion about their work moderated by David Knorr. So I hope you'll put that on your calendar. But again, to put together these shows and get them installed is always a task, and to coordinate loans, etc., takes a broad staff. And I have a wonderful staff working at the Contemporary Art Museum and Graphic Studio, and they really know how to make these projects work. I thank Alexa Favada, who coordinated the exhibition and shipping. Tony Palms, our exhibition designer, worked with the artists and to install the work. Vincent Krull is the chief preparator. The exhibition crew is Matt Schlagbaum, did I say that right? Yes? Hiroki Haraguchi and Tony Billick. And Peter Foe assisted for curator of collections, and Shannon Annis, our wonderful registrar, helped coordinate all of the condition reports and the loans. Don Fuller is our curator of new media, who did all the invitations and the PR and the banner, etc. Summer Smith and Jordia Benjamin helped with the coordination of the education programs. And students who helped with Werner Reiterer's public art project are Becky Flanders and Young-hee Hung and Alexa Torgenowitz and Molly Jacobs. And we're always indebted to our absolutely amazing, spirited security guard, David Waterman. We can't tell you all the things that he does because they're too numerous to mention. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Noel Smith. Now, Noel Smith is the curator of education, and she has served as the local coordinator and facilitator and collaborator on this project with Julien Robson, and has worked very hard to land this project on the University of South Florida campus, I think, in excellent coordination, and it looks wonderful in our museum. And I thank you, Noel, for all you did to make that work and to organize this little talk today. One of the most wonderful outcomes of a collaboration is a catalog, and we have, I think, 50 copies, right, that have been hand-bound, coming to us from the Netherlands. Am I right, Werner? That's where it was published. And I hope you'll have a look. There's one sort of dog-eared copy that you can look at the security stand, but it would really be wonderful if you people would buy the catalog. And it's really worth having. The paper is wonderful. Werner demonstrated to me it's one of those catalogs that you can open up and actually will hold the page where it's open. And it's a very comprehensive documentation of the work in this exhibition. And there's an interview with the artist and Noel Smith, and a few other essays that critically deal with the work. So please have a look at the catalog. And that's all I have to say as a preliminary. And now again, my pleasure to introduce to you Noel Smith, who will introduce our guests.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Let me first tell you our format this afternoon. Werner Reiterer will give a presentation on some of his public art projects that he's done over the years, in Europe, both in Europe and in the United States. And then we will have a little panel discussion among us, myself, Werner, Julien Robson, and Thomas Sandre, and we hope that you will join in on this discussion and ask questions and contribute your ideas as well. Werner Reiterer was born in 1964 in Graz, Austria. He studied graphic arts at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna from 1984 to 1988. and he lives and works in Vienna, Austria. This exhibition, Raw Loop, as Margaret mentioned, comes to us from the Speed Art Museum in Louisville, Kentucky. He's had numerous exhibitions over the past 20 years in Europe and worldwide, and I'll just mention a couple. One called I Sucks World, that's I Sucks World, at the Kunsthaus Graz, I can't pronounce this, Am Landesmuseum in Graz, and Meisterwerke at the Galerie Nikolaus Krug, Basel, Switzerland. He said should be all I would need to mention. So that is all I will mention about Werner. And also, you'll notice when you see these public artworks here and when you see the exhibition tonight at the museum, that they all have a very, very strong electronics component. And he's able to do that because of his collaboration with Thomas Sandri. Thomas is Austrian who lives in Vienna. He is by training a technical engineer, and over the past 20 years he has dedicated himself to working with artists. He's found it much more interesting to work with artists than in the regular kind of boring technical engineering. So Thomas is with us today. And finally, but of course not least, is Julien Robson. Julien curated this exhibition at the Speed Museum. Julien studied at the Slade School of Fine Art, worked as a curator in the British nonprofit sector before moving to Vienna. He is currently curator at of contemporary art at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. His project at the Speed Art Museum include Reverie, works from the collection of Douglas S. Kramer, Presence, Marcel, and Eyes Wide Open. Please welcome Werner Reiterer.
Welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming. As Noel has mentioned, I will presentate a few public art projects I did in the last 10 years. But before I'm going to show you the slides, I would like to give you, in my opinion, some important notes between the difference of indoor sculptures and sculptures, or so-called outdoor sculptures. And the difference, which is very important on the background concerning how you are developing art pieces in that way. So you have, for example, what for me is very interesting is that if you're going to install sculptures in the outside, you have the big difference that the public area always is read by the people as reality. To the and you have to distinguish an indoor space, for example an art museum or a gallery, where all the things who are displayed there automatically are going to be read as illusion, as art pieces. This is a very big chance concerning the public art projects, because on one hand you get 100% of all peoples involved, also those, and that's the big majority, who are not interested in art. Focusing indoor sculptures in the museum, outdoor sculptures, in my opinion, should be site-specific. So they should be done for a certain place and the environment of this area. It's a term which Richard Serra found in the 80s, but I guess you are common with this term. Indoor sculptures, you can move from one gallery to the next one. So it makes not really a difference in the content and how you read indoor sculptures if you see it in a museum or in a gallery. That's not the case if it's public art areas. Also very important, you have two big groups of public art interventions, temporary or permanent. This is very important in case of the realization of the pieces, because in technical terms it's a big difference if a piece should be on display for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or it should be permanent, because it asks for other technical solutions in that case. And also you have the problem of vandalism, so you also have to concern this in the background if you're going to make some interventions in the art, in the public area. And you have at least conservation. So in my opinion, it's not enough only to make a good intervention in public art. It's not enough only to conserve an indoor sculpture and make it probably okay for the outdoor. So then I will go to show you now 4 pieces. The first one you see here, it's an intervention I did in the year 2005, the first time in Bremen, which is a middle-sized city in the north of Germany. The title of the piece is Entrance to the Center of the World, and it's playing exactly with those options I have said before. You see a construction site, and it's done like a construction site, but all you see is fake. So it's supposed to be, or it suggests to be, a construction site where obviously someone is going to build an entrance into the center of the world. The location of this piece was at the space in front of the railway, of the main railway station in Bremen. So you could expect about 60,000 people every day who pass by here. And from the reception of the piece, it's interesting because if you, as a everyday man, you came or you pass by, the first time you see, okay, it's a construction site. But then you get maybe, for example, this white sign you see there. It's announcing, as it's usual in Europe, I guess it's the same in the United States, who is going to build something, who is the architect, engineering, all those companies are listed on there. But then you get in a conflict because you know, as you know that it's obviously it's not possible to build the entrance to the center of the world. But on the other hand, you get this suggestion. And there was, for example, one really funny story I had at that days, one day after the opening, because the director of a very important and well-known news magazine in Germany, he has had his office nearby this work. And he called me on my mobile phone and was asking, yeah, what's going on there, because he recognized this construction site and he sent a photographer to make a story about this, but the photographer came back and said, they are not already finished with the entrance. So you have exactly this sharp border between what can we believe and what is fake. And that's a very important point for me when I'm going to do a public art project. So there is one more image of it in the night, because in this small soil hill there is included a sky beamer. You can see here it's going up to 300 to 400 meters, and also there comes out lots of very, very loud sound files like hammering, explosions, all this stuff you are going to expect. But maybe Thomas, my electrician, can say a little bit more about the technical solutions concerning this piece.
Shall I do it right now?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's
Well, you see just some lights in the sky beamer. Concerning the sky beamer, is just only one question that you can you can't use it close to airports, for example. So we have to take care of that. And we just recorded, we just took from a library of sound files. We took construction site sounds and added it together. And if you know what's coming next, you can see people standing there and waiting and looking, and there will be a really hard explosion. So it's quite fun to do that. On the other hand, it was quite easy because there's an MP3 player, and there are amplifiers and some other quite simple things. But the main thing is all the electronics are in this red box outside, so it has definitely to be weatherproof. That's it.
Yeah, and what's also important, I think, is you this red box is a kind of a shelter against vandalism too. So because in public, I mean, it wasn't a permanent project. It was also shown in the Louvre in Paris, but you have to expect that late in the night someone is going over the fence, for example, and tries to steal something or to damage something. So this is always a very important point that you are going to involve solutions which are safe also for the people. The second piece I want to show is a work I did from 1999 to 2001. So it's done at the district court in Salzburg, which is a middle-sized city in Austria, and it depends, or it includes two different projects for the same building. This one is a permanent installation, and I would say you only would see, in your opinion, now one of those two projects. But I will explain it because they look like daily life. That's very often in my work that way, that I try to hide the project in a visual shape which is common. So the first project is this lamp post you see in the middle. You see it on this image. You see it as he would appear when he's in action. But you see on the right hand, for example, the same lamp post like he's usually used in this area. So if you appear to this lamp post as a passerby, you activate this lamp post to rotate around himself with light, and you can use him as the other ones do. So this is a very irritating piece too for you, because you don't expect that suddenly such a lamppost starts to rotate at its own axis.
What kind of speed did it rotate at?
It's not so fast as it appears here now. So it's doing this way, that way, and you get really strange response about such pieces because, for example, people called the district court and asked that they should fix the lamppost. What's going up there in that way? And the second intervention is the flag mast on the roof, because this flag mast is connected with the speed of the elevator inside the house. So if the elevator is on the ground floor, the flag is also on the bottom. And if someone is going with the elevator in the second floor, the flag moves to half of the mast. And the flag therefore translates activities which are going on inside the building to the outside, which is also very irritating because the flag itself is a kind of a symbol. I mean, if it's half on the mast, it regularly means someone died, for example. And yeah, well, maybe also Thomas, you can say especially about the flag, I think, because it's on a technical level, it's a really complicated technical system.
Well, it was somehow quite tricky because this building is quite high, and the flag is constantly in strong winds, and it can turn around 330 degrees, and the belt, which is bringing it up and down, has to be very special designed so that it's that it can be constantly outside by rain, ice, or something else. And well, we just connected the engine of the electro engine of the flag with the outgoing signals from the normal elevator, and we had now just 2 elevators, and that's.
Would you like to say something about the land mass too?
Well, the landmass, it's quite difficult to bring the light on this rotation part, on the upper part, but we have done it same as like a drilling machine. You get the drilling, and well, it's the only thing is that you have to fabricate this. You can't buy these things because you can't buy a rotating mast. That doesn't exist, so everything is really fabricated. Even the flag itself is specially designed because otherwise you have to change this every half a year, and this should last for long. So it's material you get to cover trucks, the back. I don't know if your trucks are covered with that. If they are really housed with.
Is it a cloth? Like
Yeah.
a vinyl cloth?
Yeah.
Okay, so go on to the next one. This is it's a permanent installation, and it stands in Louisville in front of the 21st Century Museum, and I did it 2006.
Speak up a little.
Sorry? Louder?
Louder.
Louder. I did it 2006. It has been realized, and as like in the projects before, the first time it looks like very common, except that there is a chandelier on it, which is quite a big one, and he is hanging on a gallows. But nobody realized, or most of the people don't realize it at the first view. And this chandelier is connected on an electronic level with the reception bell in the restaurant of the museum. So if someone is ringing the reception bell in the restaurant, the chandelier outside starts breathing by dimming up and down the light. And there is also, you can't see it I guess on the image, but there is also included a megaphone in the chandelier. So you get also the sound of it.
You can see it, I think.
Yeah. See it? Okay. And the interesting thing is that this really, I would even say it's glorious work in a certain way, suddenly turned totally its content and gets a little bit in the direction of, especially in this area too, for me, this was really important, that you can read this chandelier as a symbol for life, which is going to be hanged. So it's also a critical work about death penalty and Lynch justice, like it happened at the Ku Klux Klan time too. So, yeah, maybe Thomas, you can do something.
Yeah,
Something about that.
I've already done something. I mean, we had we designed some LEDs for the outside. So this, all these bulbs, we have 50 maintenance free, which was especially designed. And well, the other thing is we're just dimming it up and down, and that's, well, the only thing was we produced the chandelier in Europe and had to bring it to Louisville, and that was quite an exciting thing. If you see it in the crate over there, and 2 days or 3 days later you open the crate and you have to see what's left, you know. That was quite, yeah, that was quite a heavy thing, you know. We opened it and the crate was a little bit damaged, but it turned out all right.
You had to wire this all underground into the hotel?
Yes, yes. So we had a 2 or 3 month preparation before, because they had to open the ground and to wire from the basement to the pole, and yeah, that was another construction site, and I had the pleasure to ride a cherry picker on Main Street.
I'd like to just add a few things to this too, because it's obviously, having lived in Louisville and introduced the collector who commissioned this piece to Werner, it was something that particularly interested me. And an anecdote, for instance, is that there was someone who lived opposite in an apartment block from here, and they'd obviously watched all of this activity going on as they were digging holes and so on. Whilst they were actually building what's behind us is a hotel called 21C, which is a hotel that has a museum in it, and it has art, original contemporary art in every room, and in the restaurant and the bar and so on. So it's a kind of real gathering place for people, and at the same time it's a place where there's a lot of very kind of cutting edge type of contemporary art. But this person who lived over the road, of course, then came over one day and was protesting very loudly, and saying, you know, Steve Wilson, who's the man who had commissioned this, wouldn't commission something like this. It's really dreadful. And what really was upsetting them was that they felt that the design of the lamppost to hang it on was kind of cheap, and what they didn't recognize was that in fact they were looking at the gallows. And for me it was interesting that in a situation like this, that the work sort of somehow tries to address something about the history of the South, and the South ignores that history. It sort of puts it behind in its mind, and doesn't recognize the signs of that history, the symbols of it. Coming back to Werner talking about the notion of the thing coming, you know, a thing coming to life, being hung, and the way that this work sort of addresses that history. I think also for me there was a certain element in it too, which is to do with the way that the chandelier represents wealth and opulence, and actually the gallows generally we would think of as representing disempowerment. And we can create associations with poverty, and so there kind of comes together this sense of opulence and poverty, which for me in a contemporary art situation in a contemporary city seemed also to indicate something about the current economic situation that we live in. And the year that this was put up, of course, was during the period when George Bush had only just recently been re-elected as president, and it seemed that government policies were very much directed towards driving the poles of wealth and poverty further and further from each other. And so there was that kind of element about it too. It's a piece that became part of the landscape of the city very easily. It's perhaps the most striking piece of public art in the city, and because it does work with a bold stroke rather than trying to become something which, like a lot of the public art in Louisville, just disappears into the landscape. all I've got to say.
So, came to the fourth project. What looks like furnitures of seats or something is the ready-to-use switches of an active radio. And it's located in the schoolyard. It's a permanent installation I did from 1999 to 2001. So you can imagine every of those bases has a function, like in a radio, the switches. So the round one is the volume, and the other one are for different channels. So when a student came and sits down, the radio goes on. If there is a second student coming and sits on another furniture, the radio switched the program to the other one. So it's a very communicative piece because the students have to focus in their own interest and agreement what they want to hear and how loud they want it to hear. Because every time if someone moves, the radio translates it by switching the programs. And yeah, maybe that's also for Thomas option to say how it's on a technical level, how it's constructed.
Yeah. Well, there are sensors inside each of in these orange tops. There are sensors. So we have the smallest one is to turn it on and off, and then we have 4 different channels, and the round one you can turn like it's something similar to what we have on playgrounds. So you can turn around in circles and gets the volume up or down, and all of the control system is placed inside the school, and there's a logical programmable controllers, and of course a receiver and all such stuff. Well, that's it.
Did these have to be wired underground, or?
Yes, yes. I mean, this school was built or rebuilt new, so everything was under construction, and it was quite easy to wire underground.
So that's all. So those are, I think, the 4 projects I'm happy to show to you.
Did you have the swimming pool there, 1, 2? You don't want to talk about that?
The swimming pool.
You included that one.
Well, that's, yeah, I mean,
There you go.
just to avoid confusion, absolutely. So this is a very small piece I did, I guess 2003, for a private collector in Austria. And he invited me to do something in the outdoor of his house. And he has the swimming pool, and I decided just to mount in the circle a small text: if you're happy, fly; if you're sad, jump. And you can do both of those points, but the important thing for me was that those 2 sentences, they illustrate the whole spectrum of human behavior. You know, if you're really very happy and you jump, you have the feeling that you are flying because you're happy. And if you get in a really very big depression, you jump, and it's the same action, but it's yeah, you can read it in 2 absolute different ways.
When Werner did this show with Julien in Louisville, they did a small project, which was part of in the gallery. If you want
To describe it, we
Describe it.
commissioned Werner to make something actually in one of the galleries in the middle of the exhibition, and we had a space where we were going to hang the set of drawings. And in that space, he decided that what he would like to do was create a room where students and the public could actually come in and do their own drawings. And so he sent us out to buy lots of cheap throwaway furniture that was being discarded, and we went to thrift stores and so on. And we then brought that back to the museum, and he then spent time with a group of school students who we had, who were, they were seniors who were what we called art apprentices, who were kind of coming to the museum every week and spending an hour and learning what people in museums actually do. And they took rolls of bright yellow fluorescent vinyl, and they covered all of this furniture and the floor in this material, so that what he created essentially was a kind of bright yellow landscape within which the public could come and with sheets of paper and pencils that we left on the tables and instructions about, which was saying, you know, sit down and use this material to make drawings in response to Werner Reiterer's drawings. They then produced many drawings. This is actually illustrated in the catalogue. And those drawings were then subsequently taken into our education department's gallery and displayed there, the ones that were any good, and that weren't in any way offensive.
Can you see something?
And so when the show was coming here, Noel had a discussion with Werner about the possibility of doing a project here, which made complete sense, because I think it's great to, in any kind of museum situation, to involve educational activities and participatory activities. And I think particularly here it's important because you also have a school. And so Werner has come up with a project which you're now going to describe to us.
Okay. So it's a very small project due to the fact that there was not really a budget for a bigger one.
There's no money.
There's no money. So I decided to do a project which is focusing a very historical demonstration which takes place in the United States in 1963 in Washington, well known as the March on Washington with Martin Luther King. And I have had an assistant in Vienna. I asked to check all the slogans, or most of the slogans, which are available, the people at that time used for the demonstration. And those slogans we reproduce now, and they also have this kind of mask.
Yeah, we made signs, the type of signs you might carry in a demonstration.
Yeah, in a box, and they will be displayed in front, outdoor, in front of the museum. And that was what is interesting for me, is how interesting are those slogans now, even 46 years after those demonstrations. And it's really amazing that, in my appointment, you can use them just like now, and it looks like a demonstration like it would be okay for this times too. So to repeat a historical dimension in the presence is one of the main points for me, which is really important. And also the people are allowed to use them, that's very important. So it would be great if there should be a small demonstration.
Yeah, they're placed outside the museum in a box.
Yeah.
So they can be taken, and I was particularly pleased that it gave some of the students here at the School of Art and Art History the opportunity to collaborate with you in making the signs. So Becky Flanders especially spent a lot of time, as well as Molly Jacobs and Young another student who wants in Torchinowitz. They printed the signs, took them to Kinko's, and had them laminated on poster board, and then stapled Becky made the wooden sticks, and then they were stapled. So they're in the spirit of the movement, and they're kind of homemade. But I particularly appreciate its timing, that Martin Luther King Day coming up on the 28th, and also our inauguration. So I think it means a lot in terms of what's going on in our country right now.
And that kind of leads into something that I wanted us to talk about, and that is about audience engagement. And interestingly, it's, you know, the last presidential election is one that perhaps has created the most audience engagement of any election that's ever been held. But it seems to me that audience engagement is a very central part of your work, and whilst it has a long history of participation, it seems that we're moving to a point at present where for curators and for artists, and this is something that's very close to my own way of thinking, is that for curators and artists, rethinking how the audience actually comes into relationship with the work is changing quite a lot. And there's a sense in which we're trying to give, in a way, make the audience partners in the production of the work in some way. And that seems to be a very central part of your work. You know, for instance, when I go back to the chandelier in Louisville, one of the really interesting and funny things is that when you're in the bar or the restaurant where the bell is, you press the bell, you can't see the chandelier. And I found myself kind of pressing it and rushing outside to see if I could catch it working. But at the same time, there's an interesting implication in that, in terms of how we're involved in actions that have effect elsewhere, and we're not aware of what the effects are, or we're not conscious of them, and we don't bring ourselves to the consciousness about it. And then if we try to do that, we're sort of impeded by a lot of things. The notion of people coming in Hamburg in Bremen to this hole in the ground and wanting, you were saying that at one point you were having people phoning you and asking if they could get a job helping to dig it. Because they needed a job. And so there's this sense in which the work takes on a whole different set of kinds of meanings and functions in a very different way to the normal ways that we tend to think of art operating. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that audience engagement. So, I mean, I would imagine that it has some kind of political imperative for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's very, very important, in my opinion, that on a discussion level of contemporary art, we have to include the people who looks to art, who goes to exhibition shows, and especially in my sculptures, it's very often the fact that the piece itself, it isn't complete. It gets to become complete with the activity of the people. So if you will be at a show here in the Contemporary Art Museum, you have, for one example now, because it's too confusing to talk about all those different works, but one example, if you will be in this show, you will find on the wall a simple sheet of white paper with the text "Yell as loud as you can now." And at the first point of view, you would might think, okay, that's the piece, that's it, a small sheet of paper on the wall. But if you're really going to do it, and you're really yelling very, very loud, you will cause a really very huge action you wouldn't expect, because it would start the whole exhibition lighting going up and down by dimming the light up and down, and quite similar like the chandelier piece. And you also will have the acoustic level of the breathing of a human being. So suddenly the whole exhibition room turns into a kind of a living animal for a few seconds, and then it stops and you have the regular lighting once more. This is one aspect of this piece. Another aspect which I was interested very much was how you can bring people to this point to act against all odds. So because it's not allowed in the museum, you have always, it should be very quiet, you should not touch the art pieces and so on. And now you have this simple sheet of paper on the wall, and it asks you to do absolutely the opposite of it. And when I did this piece the first time at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, which is a very well-known and huge institution contemporary art. And they have about, I guess, about 2,000 to 5,000 people a day as visitors. This piece became a kind of an own development, because suddenly several groups find themselves and meet there, and they did a kind of a challenge. So there was one group and they were yelling very loud, and the other one tried to be a little bit more louder, and so on. And which was really, so it get really a little bit confusing there, but this was really very beautiful and fine. And which was also a very interesting aspect of the Lady Duque was that close to the exhibition rooms you have a very huge section of the restaurant, but you can't see the piece at that moment when it's active. So people sit there for lunch or something, and suddenly they hear crying on a very loud level, and some of them are not in the exhibition. So there are also regular restaurant people who only go for lunch there, haven't been in the show. And so you cause a huge, massive discussion, because suddenly oh my God, there should be an accident, what's going on there. And that's what I like very much, if a sculpture develops and produces a kind of an own life, you can't really expect anymore. So I always call it a sculptural field. So you have on one hand you have the piece itself, like its mass, or its substance, and on the other hand you have a much more bigger area where this piece makes kind of an influence on you, on other people's studios. And that's very interesting.
Well, it kind of connects to the idea that your actions have an effect on others, so you can't always control how the environment is, and what other people do affects you as well. It's not the normal experience of silently contemplating the work in a gallery.
It's a kind of a play, of a changing all the time, act, react, and as we are all individuals, you can't plan it exactly. It's very different. Also, you have also people who went out or running out and say, I can't stand this. That's the other option.
That may be the staff of the
That would be too.
But there's also an interesting set of sort of structure of negotiation that goes on too. When you think of the piece at the school with the orange benches, you know, the sense in which going into that environment, it's a learning environment to start with. That as you sit on one, it does something. As you sit on another, it does something else. And you have a group of people will start sitting down, and they have to then negotiate with each other somehow about how they're going to activate this piece of work or not. You know, and then maybe they come into argument with each other about who wants it, how loud, and which channel they want. You know, but it does seem to me also there's that element of negotiation occurs in some of the works.
I think art is very close connected to democracy. So if you, especially contemporary art, so if you look to countries which, let's say, use totalitarian systems, we don't. We should shut them down. Now, if you're looking to states with a kind of a totalitarian system, you even don't find contemporary art there. You don't find a discussion about contemporary art. And the more developed a society is, the more contemporary art you will find there, and the more discussion about it, criticism, also like very positive discussion. And that's I think that's it's a really very important and interesting note that there is obviously this connection. I think also, for example, because it's the neighbor country where I come from, Germany at the Second World War. I mean, you have had those famous exhibitions in Art der Kunst and all those stuff, where contemporary art was on a display. We don't want this anymore.
To show how degenerate it was.
Yeah, or you have to have the same with the literature. They burn down all those books. So that's really interesting. If a political system is going to allow a very open-minded discussion about art, literature, music, culture, then it's always a good sign for the constitution of the social system itself, I would say.
Julien, would you talk a little bit about how you became first introduced to Werner?
Yes, I had a part of my career has been working as an art dealer in Vienna, where I lived for 10 years in the 90s. And I worked in a gallery where we had a program of young Austrian artists and got to know actually the dealer in southern Austria, in Graz, who worked with Werner, and I think that's how we actually first came to know each other, and we knew each other all that time that I was in Austria. And I think it was when I actually moved to the States that I started to look at his work from a different perspective. You know, I wasn't right in the middle of what was going on in Austrian art at that time when I moved to the States. And I was involved in the Speed Art Museum, where we were trying to build an internationally based collection that was that had a difference to the big collections that surrounded Louisville in cities like Cincinnati and Indianapolis. You know, working in a museum that didn't have great resources, but we felt that we could create a very particular type of collection. I think it was probably 4 years ago, was it, that we decided that we wanted to do this show, and it seemed to me that the collection and the program that I was developing in Louisville was gravitating towards eventually needing a show of someone like Werner. And like all curators, you know, you work with what you have become familiar with through your travels and activities. But as we then started to put the show together, and it was very shortly after that, I think, that I came down to see Margaret and Noel. We started to talk about a collaboration on this. But gradually then it started to dawn on me that here was also an opportunity to perhaps instigate a somewhat different exhibition practice than we had been using at the Speed up until then. And whilst the Speed Art Museum was very involved in developing education programs and trying to do outreach, I don't think we had yet at that point thought in terms of engagement as being a really central function of what we should be doing with exhibitions. I became more and more convinced about engagement through a book that a colleague of mine wrote, a friend of mine who's a marketing person in Britain, which was a book that was really about how so much of marketing now is determined by the cell phone generation, and that this generation has the ability to transmit information so fast between themselves in ways that are unpredictable in terms of old-fashioned marketing, that we have to start taking note of them and to understand how all these systems work. Subsequently, I did a show in Louisville where we tried to use cell phone numbers on billboards to drive people towards a website to involve them in creative activities. But it seemed to me that working with Werner, we could approach this notion of engagement in a couple of ways. The first was, of course, that the works themselves draw you to be engaged. They ask you whether you have the courage to actually press that button or shout at the wall. And in a lot of ways, you need prompting to do it, to watch people do it in order to have the courage to do it yourself. But once you start seeing kids going berserk in the gallery, like I did in Louisville, and also watching the joy on the guards' faces when they would say to me, "No, this is the best exhibition we've ever had in this museum," because it's a joy to watch people actually doing something with the work. So it was that sense of that kind of engagement, but also at the same time then how does, I was very aware that an artist like Werner is very open to, and it's part of his practice, I'm not saying this should be the part of everybody's practice, but it's part of his practice to think about how do you do things in an environment that will actively engage people in the production of things. And so the creation of this special bright yellow terror room to let people do drawings in was a great addition to this particular show. I would have liked to have had the resources to go further and further with it, but you know, there's only so much you can do with any one exhibition, and you have to try and approach all those different ideas through different projects. But that ostensibly is how this project came about.
Let me say that very recently we have experimented under the suggestion of Noel Smith that we try cell phones in the Contemporary Art Museum. I don't know if you've all had a chance to do it. Werner, we have a very special engagement for you all if you should happen to call up the number suggested and get a little information about the show. It's yet another work, a small gesture that Werner's made. So I hope you'll embrace that, and it speaks to your interest in trying to broaden the engagement. University museums, which I won't go into now, have kind of, I think, a special obligation not only to the university community, but to the broader community, and to negotiate that has its difficulties. I wanted to ask another question. Coming to the States to do these projects, particularly in the South, in Louisville, to what, and you talked about your work being site-specific, how did you come up with this idea for Louisville, kind of a delicate matter, I would say, to do gallows with bling?
That's a good one.
Well, the project with the chandelier took place before the project for the museum in the Speed. So it was, I guess, 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years before.
like
Yeah.
that. So I remember we met in Basel, where I've had a big solo show at the art fair, at the same time like the art fair in 2003, I guess. And Julien introduced me to Steve Wilson, who commissioned the piece. And I was really interested about it because I'm always interested to realize public art projects, because it's not so often that in that way opportunities are offered, because it's a much more difficult area than indoor sculptures. You can do it, organize shows in museums much more easily than doing a project outside. And then honestly, I didn't know where Louisville was based. So I checked in the web, and I looked a little bit around, in which kind of environment, in which position, also on politically, historically levels, what's going on there. And then it came into my mind that it would be even a good solution to have, as Julien mentioned, you have this big chandelier, which is also symbol for richness and all this stuff. And museums are, in a certain way, a luxury institutions level. But I think it's very important that we afford this luxury level. And on the other hand, I was interested to do, as I do it all the time, that there is a certain second level which has a little bit an anarchistic touch, let's say in that way. And the movement of the Ku Klux Klan, and also the death penalty discussions, which is really very present in Europe, especially the death penalty justice, was for me also a motivation to do it in this way. So I was thinking about how can you make a really interesting connection between this richness of the chandelier and the outside, and on the other hand, with this connection to those really very poor and hard situation on a political level. That was the funny thing was that obviously Steve Wilson
in the first few, he always saw under those chandelier. He didn't recognize really what, I think he didn't really recognize what he was going to order.
And I think it's worth. I'll just add one thing before you. And I think it's worth noting also that Steve Wilson has a penchant for chandeliers, which I think is one of the motivations for making a chandelier, because the hotel is full of art chandeliers of one sort or another.
Great. I'd like to open it to questions now or discussion. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
I want to know about what the process is for getting these works okayed by like city governments and stuff. Like, is it all the public works that you talked about? Is it all for commission, or what kind of paperwork and things you have to file? How long does that whole thing take?
It's totally different. I can speak, mainly I can speak about the situation in Europe. Because
Talk about the
yeah, you can do something about the United States. In Europe, regularly you are going to be invited in competitions, but there are also existing projects which are open for all people. So you can just send your proposal to a jury, and there will be a meeting regularly. You have time of 2 to 3 months to develop something, and finally and hopeful at the end you will win and you can go to realize it. But it's always a long process. It's always a long-term process. So especially if it's projects which are permanent, because there are so many different institutions who are talking with you, have some questions, you have to do that in that way, and so on. And one big, or let's say there is one dangerous development. Many artists get involved in this, is that you have a really great idea, and then there came the different officials, and they cut you this, and at the end, only very stupid stuff, boring stuff will survive to the end. And all those artists are always excusing themselves at the end. Yeah, well, I did it. Yeah, okay, but don't mention it. And so this is really a strange thing. So it's a really hard process, and you have to be in a certain way. You have to develop strategies how to handle those. In my case, it was always also very helpful for me to make this collaboration with Thomas, because he's really very tough in this, especially in those questions of maybe there comes the fire department, for example, and they are saying, okay, you are using this stuff, but you can't use this stuff in this environment, in this building, so think about something else. If you don't have this option on yourself, you will fail, I would say. So maybe Thomas, you can give some more points there too. So,
Well,
or a small anecdote.
A small well, see, that it's part of my education is I worked for a museum for more than 10 years as the manager of the fire department there, and the security and everything. So I got some good ideas how things should go, or even if you have no ways to do it, how to talk to these people to get them on your side. Because I mean, we're only talking about laws and regulations, and you can bring people together if you describe what you want to do. First time is always contemporary art. They mostly don't like it. But if you tell them, especially pieces that Werner develops, they get they get excited about that, and they sometimes begin to help you to solve these problems. Well, that's what I try to do.
I think in the States it's very much the same too. And in most cities there will be either some kind of commission or a committee answerable to the mayor that will take proposals and pass them in front of all the relevant bodies to make sure that it fits to code. Your main problem is again the problem of getting people to be convinced about the kind of imagery that you're using, the type of thing that contemporary art is. With the chandelier in Louisville, we were very lucky. I was on the mayor's committee for public art, and the mayor of Louisville would rather see bronze statues of sports stars dotted around. Although I think recently, from what I gathered from a colleague who's on that committee, that somehow he's been converted. But we had a very wealthy private individual who was commissioning this piece of work and who was having a lot of influence on the city because of the kind of money that he and his wife were going to pump into commercial projects like this hotel and another project they were planning to do. And they were willing themselves to pay for all of the digging up the pavements and putting them back, and they had to pull out a tree, and they were willing to donate a tree to the city to replace that tree. And so there was really no problem at the end, as long as it fit with the code that it needed to fit. It was possible for them to get away with it. The mayor kind of, in a way, he bowed over to money. So we were lucky. Yeah, what a surprise.
You have a question?
Well, I have a question, and I think already forgot. But I am interested in your statement about the socio-political statement of the art. I happened to live in Germany 39 years ago. And at that time, this new movement of modern art was in place. And to me, it was shocking to see that exactly what you said, the reaction from a society that had been first in one area and now is to the other extreme. And my question for you is, I understand you are from Germany.
Austria.
From Austria. From your point of view, due to the historical events in this territory of the planet, does the artist really have a full awareness of where this art movement is creating a consciousness or a truly message that develop a new state of consciousness for everybody? Is the artist aware of where your art is going and how socially will affect our state of civilization?
No, absolutely no.
So for instance,
It's
the
impossible. Nobody on the world can. If there would be someone who can say that, he would be really a great guy.
But you talk about the metaphor you have with the chandelier, and it's, to me, it's clear, this metaphor is clear. But, and to you, perhaps, but how this subconscious message really affects the common individual?
No, I think it's always try and error, and you only can do or try to do in your professions a good job. And in my opinion, for my job, I never did something else like art. I only try to make art pieces which are, in my opinion, on the state of the art, and are trying to focus a kind of a feeling I have in my life. So if someone is going to read this work in the same intention I did it or not, is only it's not so important. The much more important thing is, or what I want to wish to my art pieces, that there is in a certain way a connection to the people who see it. But it should not be the same reading message like I intended. And I mean, we are so many people
it's impossible to make forecasts in that way. So in which direction you would go? It's a very big dimension of discussion where many clever people give their opinions in it.
I think I would add to that it's dangerous to think of art as being messages in the conventional sense. Because what happens then is that the notion of it being a message actually closes down its potential for signification. And what it seems to me, and you may disagree with my reading of what you do, but I think actually it's a form of resistance to that sort of closure. In one sense, you can plant, his intention can be to plant a gallows and a chandelier in a place that he understands, or has come to an understanding of its history in order to make an ironic statement within that environment. But the thing is that the signs mutate and they change, and they develop different kinds of responses, so they become much more open. And they don't become a kind of single, kind of closed message. So in one sense, it's not a closed message about Lynch, justice, and rich people. It also has many other elements that float around it, which are to do with interactivity, negotiation, actions that you can't see happening. That you take one action and it cause and effect. And it seems to me that in one sense, Werner's interpretation of it, of course, I would say, like any artist's view of their work, is just another interpretation. Because once the work is out there, it's left the artist's hands. It's now in the public domain and it's open to reading. So it can't be controlled in that way. And I think to imagine that it can be controlled in that way would be romantic. And at the same time, I think there's a sense in which the way that Reiterer's works, and I would apply this to all of the best works that are ever made, the way that they don't become closed down into those singular monolithic meanings means that they keep resisting our desire to gain control of them and to use them in a controlled fashion. And that seems to me to be democratic and liberating and revolutionary in some way.
Let me tell a small anecdote about that because it fits perfect. I was invited many years ago for a temporary public art project with 3 or 4 other artists in a very small village in Lower Austria. And all the artists came in with their proposals. And after, let's say, 1 week, there was a really very amazing response from people there, who lived there, and they all were against the project. So the curator decides to make a meeting in a restaurant with all those people to discuss about that. And I was on the podium sitting there and it was telling about my project, which was a very small one. It was a kind of a birdhouse with a solar roof. So the solar produced energy for a small chip which was inside the birdhouse. And when the sun was up, the birdhouse always was singing like a bird. And when the sun goes down, there was no electricity, it was off. And there was one woman who was really climbing me and said, yeah, and that's no art, and we have to give our money for that, and so on. And I responded and said, I'm not interested if you like it or you don't like it. And she was really shocked about that. And I told her, but I'm interested that you can sit there and say your opinion, as I am going to make my statement in the small circle in this village. And at the end of the discussion, she came to me and said, I still don't like this. but I'm supporting it now, because I've thought about that, and maybe if it's turned around, I have get the problem once when I have an intention and someone else is going up and say, no, I don't like it, and it's gone. So that was really interesting because she learned a little bit about a social process. She didn't learn something about art itself as a message or whatever. But this was really great.
One more question. Anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned joy and the security guards being happy about what was happening. There seems to be a level of mirth and joy and fun that imbues a lot of the work you've shown today, and I just wondered if you talk a little bit about that.
About the fun.
Whether you bring that intentionally to it, if that's something that you intend for others to giggle as they see something.
I'm always saying that art functions on different levels. And one good starter could be irony or humor. So I try all the time when I'm going to install works or sculpture drawings, whatever, that there is a certain kind of humor, because this enables people much more easier to get into a contact with it. And what's very important for me is that it's not only this only level. So because then it's only jokes, it's not more. So but there should be the option to explore much more levels which are behind that. So it's just like architecture. You open the first door. If the first door is going open to be open easy, it enables you much more easier to get into this house. And then you choose your doors as you like it. But if you can't open this first door, it's really very hard. And I remember all those boring not execution, sorry. what's the other one?
Exhibitions.
Exhibitions, yeah. But why not execution? Where, I mean, I always have had the feeling it's so hard to get in a connection because it's such a dry stuff to do, and it's only on I mean, there is no fun in it. That's sometimes not helpful.
I'm wondering if at some point has the vandalism of your work looked like interaction?
That could be an interaction.
Does it get to stay as part of the exhibit or as part of the installation, or does it?
I mean, I don't ask for vandalism, but I mean, as we have had this a very small kind, a very smooth kind of vandalism was when the registrar of the Speed Art Museum called me, I guess after one month's running time of the show at the Speed in Louisville, that on the chewing gum hill I have collected, which is part of the show, someone has added his own chewing gum. But she was really concerned that I'm angry or whatever. But I liked it very much. It's really funny that someone.
That's not to invite chewing.
Yeah. No, but it's fine. It's okay.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, I will. Thank you all for being here, and we're opening tonight at 7 to 9 at the Contemporary Art Museum. So I welcome you all to come join the celebration.
Don't forget to buy the book.
Oh, there you go.